The Grundomat piercing tool was designed for easy serviceability. It is constructed of four main components: the tool casing, the step cone assembly, the piston, and the control stud assembly. Each tool has a serial number located on the rear of the tool casing. You may need to refer to this number to order the correct parts for the tool. Read, understand, and observe all safety information and instructions in this video and the printed manual. For safety reasons, read the printed maintenance manual carefully and exercise caution while performing maintenance on the Grundomat piercing tool. Please note specific safety requirements as explained in the printed manual and called out in this video. This video is to be used in conjunction with the printed Grundomat maintenance manual. Before attempting any repair or maintenance, the Grundomat should be secured. A great deal of torque is required to loosen and remove the front and rear assemblies. TT Technologies has developed a special repair stand for the Grundomat, which not only supplies the required stability, but also provides excellent access to the tool during service. The repair stand is adaptable to any tool size. Contact TT Technologies for more information about the Grundomat repair stand. The step cone is attached to the chisel with special roll pins. With a hammer and a roll pin punch, remove the roll pins in the step cone. The step cone is removed with the help of a step cone removal ring. The bolts are positioned in the gap between the step cone and the casing tip body. After positioning the removal ring, tighten all bolts firmly. Position an impact armor on the chisel head and strike it several times with a large hammer. You may need to retighten the removal ring until the head cone comes loose. The Grundomat is designed with indentations for the attachment of special spanner wrenches. The spanner wrenches fit into the indentations to provide the high degree of torque needed to loosen the threads on the front and rear assemblies. The threaded pins are hand-tightened only. It may be necessary to heat the outside of the casing to liquefy the thread bonding sealant before the seal bond can be broken. Use a temperature-sensitive heat stick to monitor casing temperature. Use a blowtorch or other heat source to heat the tool casing evenly to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Do not heat the rear of the Grundomat to remove the reverse cone or pipe-pulling tailpiece. Hold the tool in place with one spanner wrench. Strike the forward spanner with a large hammer until the casing tip is loose. Remember to allow the casing tip to cool down before attempting to disassemble further. Separate the chisel and the casing tip body and remove the spring from the chisel. Remove old seals and O-rings. The Grundomat seal kit contains all the seals, O-rings, and piston slide tapes you'll need to refurbish your Grundomat. Install the O-ring on the chisel and the Teflon seal on the top of the O-ring. One end of the chisel spring is chamfered, the other end is flat. Push the spring onto the chisel with the chamfered end down. Next, grease the spring and the chisel seal. Assemble the chisel and casing tip body. Install the O-ring into the groove near the front of the casing tip and place the split cone seal on top of the O-ring. Squeeze the seal into place. The 3 3/4 inch, 4 inch, and 5 inch tools require more than one O-ring. Please refer to the chart in the manual for the correct number of O-rings. Now you are ready to assemble the casing tip onto the tool body. Remember that the serial number is on the rear of the tool. The casing tip goes on the other end. Reposition the tool so that the spanner is set for tightening. Now screw the casing tip into the casing. Screw it on until it bottoms out, but do not lock it in place. Push the step cone onto the chisel. Make sure that the holes in the step cone line up with the roll pin grooves on the chisel. The step cone will need to be driven onto the chisel to finish lining up the roll pin grooves. This is accomplished with a pipe section and a hammer. Always use new roll pins when attaching the cutter cone. Drive the larger roll pins in first with the split side toward the outside. Be sure you are using the long roll pins in the back and the short ones in the front. Drive the smaller diameter roll pins in next with the split side toward the inside. Again, be sure you are using the long pins in the back and the short ones in the front. Drive the roll pins in until they are flush with the bottom of the opening and until they are even on both sides, top and bottom. After installing the roll pins, unscrew the casing tip assembly. Clean the threads. After cleaning both sets of threads, spray the thread locking activator, if needed, onto the threads and let dry for 1 minute. Apply Loctite in a zigzag fashion onto the first half of the internal threads of the casing. Apply Loctite in a zigzag fashion over the length of the threads on the casing tip. Reinstall the casing tip assembly and complete tightening by striking the spanner several times with a large hammer. To replace the whip hose with the tool fully assembled, put the control stud into the reverse position. Using 2 wrenches, remove the whip hose from the control stud. Apply Loctite 567 to the threads of the whip hose and assemble. Attach a spanner to the reverse cone and loosen with a large hammer. Next, remove the control stud. Remove the exhaust ring and inspect for damage and wear. Remove the exhaust ring safety segment. Apply heat to liquefy Loctite holding the control stud adapter and remove. Remember to allow it to cool down before attempting to disassemble further. Remove lock piece bushing and spring. Release spring torque by compressing the spring toward the front of the control stud until the spring tab is exposed. Allow the spring to unwind 1/2 to 3/4 of a turn. Twist the lock piece bushing 1/4 turn counterclockwise to slide it off the control tube. Remove the spring. Clean all parts and inspect for damage and wear. Replace if needed. To replace the Teflon seal, cut off the old seal. Then replace it by stretching the new seal to fit onto the control stud. Then reform it with a compression clamp. Leave the clamp on for several minutes. Insert the spring into the control stud, fitting the spring onto the end of the hole inside the control liner. Install the lock bushing, pushing it onto the control stud. Pull back the spring and turn counterclockwise from the front at least a half turn and snap it into the nearest hole inside the lock bushing. This provides the torque for the operation of the control stud. Apply Loctite 271 or 277 to the control stud adapter and tighten until it fits all the way onto the control stud. Test the operation of the lock bushing, making sure that the spring is sufficiently tensioned to snap back the bushing into position when released. Fit the exhaust ring onto the control stud and install the safety segment. Insert the control stud into the control stud housing, lining up the two indentations inside the control stud housing with the protrusions on the exhaust ring. Reinstall the reverse cone or pipe pulling tailpiece if it had been previously removed. To remove the whip hose if the internal Allen screws cannot be reached, first remove the reverse cone or pipe pulling tailpiece. Unscrew the 3 socket head cap screws of the hose connection using an Allen wrench. Use 2 socket head cap screws as jack screws to remove the whip hose. Place an O-ring on the groove of the hose connection and whip hose if needed. Unscrew the socket head cap screws from the threads. Press the hose connection into the control tube in a way that the bores align with the threaded bores of the control tube. Screw in the 3 socket head cap screws with lock washers and evenly tighten them using an Allen wrench. Reinstall the reverse cone or pipe pulling tailpiece if it had been previously removed. Attach a spanner to the reverse cone, loosen with a large hammer, and take it off. Next, remove the control stud from the control stud housing. Pry open the elastic block and remove it from the control stud. Place the control tube end into the disassembly tool until the bore tool overlaps the bores of the control tube. Screw the bolt into the bore. Secure the bolt with a nut to hold in place. Place disassembly tool over the control tube end so that the disassembly tool sits on the support ring of the elastic block. Tighten the control tube end so that the elastic block is compressed and both halves of the segmented rings can be taken off. Take the segmented rings out of the groove of the control tube using a tool such as a screwdriver. Loosen the nut until the system has no tension. Loosen the nut and release the disassembly tool. Take the stop ring and sealing ring off the control tube. Remove all seals and O-rings with an O-ring pick or other tool. Clean all components. Place the control sleeve seal into the groove of the control sleeve. Carefully expand the cylindrical sealing ring of the seal kit. Use a hose compression clamp to compress the seal back into its original size. Remove the hose compression clamp. Place the O-ring into the inner groove of the control sleeve. Place the control sleeve seal into the inner groove of the control sleeve in the shape of a kidney. Place the O-ring in the groove of the stop ring. Place the O-ring of the seal kit into the external groove of the stop ring. Slip the sealing ring of the seal kit over the groove of the stop ring. Replace the control tube O-ring and seal. Apply a thin layer of grease or lubricating oil over the sliding parts. Slip the control sleeve over the control tube. Place the stop ring with the lateral groove facing the control tube and into the control sleeve. Slip the elastic block over the control tube. Slip the support ring over the control tube. Place the control tube end into the disassembly tool until the bore of the tool overlaps the bores of the control tube. Screw bolt into the bore. Secure the bolt with a nut to hold in place. Place the disassembly tool over the control tube end so that the disassembly tool sits on the support ring of the elastic block. Tighten the screw of the control tube so that the elastic block is compressed and both halves of the segmented rings can be installed. Hold the segmented rings into the groove of the control tube while unscrewing the nut to release tension. Remove the disassembly tool from the control tube end. Release the screw and remove the control tube end out of the control tube. Open the elastic block and place onto the control tube. Secure the Grundomat on the special repair stand. Remove any add-on accessories using spanner wrenches. Pull the control stud out of the control stud housing using the whip hose. Use spanner wrenches and a hammer to loosen the control stud housing. You may need to heat to 400 degrees Fahrenheit to liquefy the Loctite. Remember to allow it to cool down before attempting to disassemble further. Place the piston extractor hook into the bore of the piston, and remove the piston from the casing, grabbing one end of the piston exhaust holes and sliding the piston out. Remove the old slide tapes and split seal, clean the piston, and inspect it for wear or damage. Position the front slide tape in the groove of the piston and begin to insert the piston into the tool casing. Install the new rear slide tapes and piston seal alternate in the gaps so that they are not in line. Make sure there is a 1/16 inch gap in the slide tapes. Push the piston in all the way. Make sure the piston moves freely in the casing by pushing and pulling it several times with the piston hook. Install control stud housing into the casing using specified Loctite product on the threads and tightening with a spanner wrench and a hammer. Insert the control stud into the housing. Then install and tighten the reverse cone or pipe pulling tailpiece using Loctite 567 on the threads and tightening with a spanner and a hammer. Before operating the tool, check to ensure that the piston is able to move freely inside of the tool casing.